learned early that nobody actually listens. So why bother trying, right? Yeah, that makes so much sense. Your body learned my voice doesn't change anything. Of course you shut down. That wasn't weakness. That was protection. Welcome, everyone, to Unmasked Coaching. But also, this is the first Unmasked Live, where you see the man behind the camera, where we just shoot the shit. And I show you who I am just by my energy and how I come off, in real time instead of edited and script and all of that. All that's really great stuff. It's good to have a focused narrative and be able to fine tune things. But I've always loved to be able to just riff, to be able to just open up and spill out and share and whatever, right? And that's what this is about. Because ultimately, what I'm trying to do here is be vulnerable, be authentic, and showing that it is like so imperative, especially in this day and age, for us to be authentic, for us to share what's on our minds. And well, of course, if you've watched any of my videos, you know that specifically the three personalities, the voices in our heads. If you've ever listened to Falling in Reverse, there's some voice in the head. Ronnie Radke, that dude knows how to friggin', give it for sure. But anyway, the lyrics are really resonant of what I'm essentially trying to do here. And there's actually a lot of mediums that are doing this kind of thing, right? Where you're listening to the criticisms in your mind about yourself and about other people, and it can get to you, right? Like we've all had moments where we've, like, say, for example, you're at work, right? And you're doing a project and you're working at that project, and maybe, you're new to it. You haven't been working there for that long. And so you're not that skilled in this particular project yet. So you're going at it hardcore, but then you mess up, right? Like just like anything else, that's actually part of course, understanding something is messing it up and continuing to do so until you finally get it. But there's always that voice in the back of our head that says, oh, well, fuck, man, like you're screwing this up. Everybody around here is looking at you. Do you realize that? Do you realize how fucking stupid you look right now? Look at you messing up like this. You are a complete and total failure. You're not going anywhere in life. Like, and the voices, we all know, right? That they are fucking brutal sometimes. Well, not sometimes, a lot of the time. And the thing is, though, is I'm going to say this, is that the majority of people are not willing to admit that they have voices in their head that are detrimental to they're not detrimental. I'll say this, is that it doesn't really matter what those voices are saying in your mind, as long as you don't act on them and you don't think that they're real. That's where you're good. But if you think that they're real, if you believe that the voice that, what I was just sharing earlier, that you're a piece of shit, like you're not going anywhere in life, all these people are looking at you, like all this stuff, they know how ridiculous you are. If you literally think that that's actually you speaking to yourself, what a fucking miserable existence you live right now, honestly. And that's where I've been. That's where I've been most of my life. And most people live there. Most people operate there the majority of the time. And this is brought on by multiple factors, but a big part of the reason why this is the case is it has a lot to do with our childhood. It has a lot to do with our parents and how we were raised. And I'm not putting anything on parents. It's not their fault. No one's to blame. No one's intentionally being malicious and hurting, children and trying to, knowing that they're going to be, struggling later on in life. Of course not. Okay. This is all unconscious because guess what? Like the earlier generations, like the baby boomers, for example, right? My parents' generation, they were not aware of anything to do with emotional health. Like, it doesn't matter, like back in that generation, now people still don't know really what to do with emotional health. They don't understand what it actually is. We have all of these different types of philosophies and mindsets out there. Like, for example, Stoicism, right? Like, I had that series briefly that I was doing on called Breaking the Illusion, where I would go in and talk, addressing videos specifically from these teachers that are supposedly like, really crazy professional in their field, but yet they're talking about false information, like Stoicism. Like the whole concept behind Stoicism, the idea that you could literally will yourself to feel better. It's fucking retarded. I'm sorry to say, it's ridiculous because when you understand, and this is literally the whole foundation of this channel. It's called polyvagal theory, okay? And it is the most amazing, most logically evidential thing that exists. And it's all to do with neuroscience. It's all to do with biology. And it comes down to our nervous system, okay? So the basis actually of these three voices that I've created, and of course, we got lots of different voices. Obviously, it's not just like three, but it's easier to be able to represent that to you in three instead of fucking however many you got, right? We all got different voices in our head that all have different, wills in a sense, a different, you could call it state of mind, a perception of how they see the world around them. Or I wouldn't call them they, but well, yes, they, because there's multiple. You know what I'm talking about at this point. And this is brought on, okay, so polyvagal, right? Poly means multiple, and vagal is your vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve, if you search it up online, you will see that it is basically a massive strand of all of these different, it's like a highway that's all part of different parts of your body. And it literally connects to your brain stem. Basically, it goes down into your body, and then it literally shoots out all of these nerve endings, shoot out all over your body. And basically what that is doing, it's connecting every part of your body. So it's essentially the vagus nerve is the highway that makes you being able to communicate. Like your brain is able to then communicate with the rest of your body. Okay. So we're not dealing with just, and this is a really big thing here when it comes to CBT, for example, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay. So the basis for the majority of self-help, motivation, psychology, therapy, when you go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and when you get them to, with your insurance, of course, because your insurance covers those things, and you sit down and they talk to you about your past and all these different things. The majority of them, now I'm not saying that's all of them, there's a lot of great therapies actually that are now showing and understanding when it comes to the nervous system and the importance of that and how it actually has to do with our health overall. But unfortunately right now, the main psychologists and sociologists and stuff like that, they are fixated on this CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where essentially it's the trauma, and trauma is the things that we've experienced in life. And it doesn't have to be, in our past, especially. Now, of course, there's still trauma that can happen to you, of course, any day. But I'm not talking about, a car accident or coming back from wartime. Like those are clearly, yes, obviously traumatic experiences, which is known as CPD. Not CPD, PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. But we're talking about something more, complex in a sense. It's called complex PTSD. And it's complex because there's a lot of layers to it, that it's not just revolving around the trauma that you've experienced at one point. That is this massive, crazy thing, an event like, a terrorist bombing or whatever. This is something that is, it compounds because it's little things over time that basically add up to you perceiving the world in a different way. And we're talking about, say, for example, just one example, a coach of mine, she told me that basically there was this client that she had. And this client was trying to understand why she was having difficulties, like feeling feminine, like being able to just be gentle, to be able to just be, really compassionate and loving, and just, just a gentle soul like women are, right? And what she ended up finding out, the coach, when talking with her client, is that she found out that when she was a child, this client, her sister, her older sister, and she was at like 3 years old at this point, told her that basically the reason why there was, because at that point there was like a lot of her family was getting together, and there was like some sort of family to get together or whatever. And anyway, the daughter, which is the client, the little girl at this time in the memory, she basically asked her sister of like, did my parents, want a boy or whatever, because she noticed, and she was remembering about like the fact that the kid, when she was like really young, and her sister told her that she basically was supposed to be a boy. And so the little girl at 3 years old was told by her sister that, oh no, you were supposed to, their family wanted a boy, and actually that's why they got like neutral clothing, but they wanted a son rather than a daughter. Now, chances are that's probably not even true. Of course, every parent loves their child, no matter if they're a boy or a girl or whatever. But unfortunately, to this, young, impressionable child at 3 years old, she just saw that, oh, me as who I actually am, in the sex that I am, is not accepted. And my family are not accepting me at my core. So therefore, I'm going to suppress that part of me and become what they wanted in the first place. And just really think that the fact that this is only just one tiny little example of one conversation when a person was really small, and they, obviously it probably wouldn't even matter if, it was a random stranger. Kids are impressionable, but the fact that it came from her sister who she loved, and essentially, children are sponges, so they will literally believe anything you tell them. So she believed that. And that sat with her to the point where it affected her into adulthood, where then she repressed her ability to be feminine and to be nurturing. And actually, when the coach was talking, she was also saying that the client was in that moment when she was in that office with her. She said that the client was actually having issues with her daughter, and the daughter was exhibiting the same attributes of being more masculine than feminine. So it not only affected her life, but it affected her daughter's life as well. And so what we're dealing with here is not only something that a small, tiny trauma that compounds into adulthood for that one person, but then that same trauma then transfers to another person, to someone closer to them, generational trauma. Now, you take that small example and you balloon that out to all the other instances where things just happen in life. Say, for example, your wife, she's in the kitchen. You're watching TV or whatever, and she asks you, in a certain way about, say, for example, like finances. Like, oh, did you pay? Oh, you still didn't pay that bill. Like, and just the way her tone and the way that she said that. If you have a root pain from your childhood or your past, where, like, say, for example, like money was an issue or whatever, right? Like, so money was difficult to come by for your family. You were more like, in poverty, in a poverty mindset where there was never enough money. And so your family had like shame around money and guilt around it. And so you developed, in a sense, like this feeling of like anytime you had money that you'd feel guilty about it, or that just the mention of money would just like make you feel really strange and like not, in a sense, safe. And we're going to get into that. But just that conversation alone, that your wife didn't intentionally try to like say it a certain way. She's not trying to jab at you or trying to like, do one up on you or something by saying that. It's just a normal life, everyday type question that people ask. It's just trying to understand, oh, did you pay that bill or not, kind of thing, right? But if you have that wound in your past, that will actually trigger, and it will trigger that memory from your past, and not only the memory, but the emotion that came with that. If you felt in the time, with your mom and dad, and like you were having difficulties like putting food on the table, and there were times where your parents were working so much just to pay the bills, and you were just feeling so tight in your chest. You're feeling tight and maybe even like sweaty, feeling like the world was like closing in on you, and like your breath was shallowing, and you were unable to kind of breathe normally. And that experience, that what's known as a somatic experience, your body physically reacting to what happened in your past, that conversation with your wife, that comment hits your nervous system, and your nervous system assumes that that is happening again, and that what happened back then is happening again now. And so it's not that you're just having a normal conversation with your wife and she just says something. It's that you are reliving the trauma of how you felt back then when you were that little kid, and you were defenseless, and you felt like you were there was no hope. There was no like way of getting out of this. You were going to be stuck there forever because you didn't have that ability to control your environment by the money that was coming into the home. So that right there is just another example, just a tiny example. So you have your sister in your past at 3 years old telling you, joking around with you like sisters do, or brothers or whatever, right? Like, it's just kids being kids. They're not trying to maliciously hurt you, right? And then you have, a parent that had a certain, situation of struggling with money and all that, right? These are experiences, these are circumstances that will happen in life, right? But as kids, we're so impressionable. We're like sponges, and we soak that all in. And so essentially you will then not only, and that's the worst part about it, is that kids, they will hold on to those things. They will hold on to those memories, right? And they will become core beliefs that follow you into your adult years. And they sabotage your adult years. They sabotage your ability to feel confidence, to be able to understand that you're capable. If say, for example, because obviously this is face yourself, so I'll just use an example for myself. Because I had ADHD growing up, and the reason why, I was a sensitive child, especially. It's known as a highly sensitive person, where you're very much aware of the emotions of other people. And anyway, in my household, my family, people, my mom, my dad, especially my dad and my sisters, they were not that sensitive when it came to emotions and understanding other people's emotions or wanting to share other people's emotions. And so there wasn't really much like personal conversation and dialogue and just like being very personal within a family unit. And now that is very common, right? So um, basically having that, I developed this understanding of, well, I developed a shame, and shame, if for anyone that doesn't know. So, and I always use this comparison to understand what shame actually is. So guilt is that you did something wrong. Okay. You did something wrong. So guilt, you can actually correct the mistake. So, okay, I did something wrong. Therefore, I can do something different. And therefore, I'm no longer guilty. But shame tells you I am something wrong. So, to your very core, you are defective and there is no hope for you. That's what shame is. So, for me, shame was telling this story that I was always going to be alone, that if I ever shared my true emotion, my true feelings, that they would always be uh, either suppressed in the sense of gaslit, of being like, kind of downplaying the severity of how I felt or what I was believing at the time or whatever. Um, or it was just totally, well, judged in a way of um, persecuted. I wouldn't say persecuted, obviously not, but punished, right? Like, because for me, my primary emotion was anger, and so anger. By the way, for anyone that doesn't know, anger is a secondary emotion, and it's actually from basically either being scared or being sad. Anger is something that is suppressed so long that it bubbles up until you just can't take it anymore. You fucking explode. So there's a lot of that going on with me. But also anger is a protector. So anger comes in to save you from the feelings of overbearing grief and depression and all of the things that come with just feeling like you are dead, like literally dead. And I honestly did think that I was dead early on in my life, before, well, most of my life, I really did. I have felt like that. Anyway, get into that another time. For anyone that doesn't know, I have Ashes to Altars, which is my book. And right now I'm kind of putting that into voice episodes. So you kind of get a little taste of that each time. But anyway, that's besides the point. So with that shame factor is that shame of, okay, like I can tell that I'm different than my family members. I can tell that they don't want to experience life the way that I do. And so I carried that with me. And especially when I was diagnosed with ADHD. And for anyone that doesn't know, that ADHD, well, everybody freaking knows, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, duh. But and the narrative, the official story is that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADD, is a learning disability, and that it is something that can be managed through medication and certain different habits that you can form over time of like different like sleep improvements and diet and exercise and stuff like that. I would agree with the latter. We all have our different beliefs about different things for different reasons. But I would say for me personally is that I believe that ADHD is actually a dysregulated nervous system. That's really what it is. Now, to be honest, though, there is a component where there's something to do when it comes to heightened processing ability with people that are, I would say, called neurodivergent. Now, that's a whole different thing, and I don't want to get into that here. But essentially, being someone with ADHD, or being diagnosed with someone with ADHD and labeled early on in my life, it was very difficult to separate myself from that idea of shame. So I had the narrative growing up from being highly sensitive with my family that, oh, okay, if I'm my true self, my like bolsterous, being able to share, just emotions and being able to let it out, that will be punished. So I have to come up with a different version. And therefore, well, that's the reason why the mask is in the logo. That's the whole part of it, is that the false self is something that we all develop. It's something that is just how it works, where we need to protect ourselves. And so we come up with a different version that is acceptable to our loved ones. Now, if our parents were raised in understanding emotional intelligence and understanding these things that I'm describing to you, then a child would be able to actually express anger, frustration, would be able to even rage, any emotion on that wheel, a child should be able to express every bit of it, because that is the fullness of who we are, right? Our emotions, they're telling a story. And so if we don't express these emotions, they're going to, well, explode, or they're going to be repressed, and then they're going to come out other ways, because energy never just dissipates and it goes away. You have to get it out somehow. And so with my anger, it would always come out in other ways, in destructive, rebellious behavior and stuff like that. So anyway, that mindset, what I was, getting at, to get back on the point here, that shame, when you have that belief that you are the problem, that there's something inherently wrong with you, and then that carries with you into an adulthood, and that's exactly what happened with me. So that belief, oh, okay, there's something inherently wrong with me down to my core. So when I was labeled ADHD, that was my choice in terms of me identifying with that. I didn't have to continue on with, identifying with that label. I did that because there was already that internal belief from my childhood that I am inherently broken and that I need to cover up and be someone different in order to be accepted. And so that's why I got into drugs, a lot of drugs in my life. I got into sleeping with a lot of women, unfortunately. I got into trouble with the police, and of course, a lot of mental health issues, depression, anxiety. But the biggest factor was my lack of purpose, lack of identity, lack of understanding who I really was. Because at that time, well, for one, I didn't know God. I didn't have any understanding of who God was. It was just this emptiness that I felt on the inside, and I was trying so desperately to fill it. And that emptiness was caused by that internal belief that I had of me inherently being broken. And so it took me a long time to be able to understand that it's really not as simple as some people are just chemically imbalanced and broken and need medication in order to function properly, as opposed to no, everybody always has moments of feeling broken, and then they always have moments of feeling at times like that they're whole, that they're able to do things, that they're able to succeed in life, that they're able to take on new goals and ambitions. Now, the difference there is that the window is that a person is only as healthy as the window of tolerance that they can achieve. Now, I know I'm kind of going off on some jargony terms here, so let me get into kind of showing how that shame piece, how that when I was talking also about trauma specifically, how all of that has to do with polyvagal theory. Okay, so I was talking about the vagus nerve, right? Vagus nerve connects to every part of your body. I mentioned that ADHD is a dysregulated nervous system. So within Polyvagal, and this was the first thing that I learned from Polyvagal, okay? And it is the fact that you have what is known as an autonomic ladder. Now, this is something that's not actually in your body or in your brain or anything. It's just a diagram, a visual representation of how your mind operates and your body operates, your nervous system. So, and this is, guys, this is so crucial to understand, so important. This is the key truly in understanding yourself and understanding other people and why they behave the way they do and why you behave the way you do. And the moment that you become aware of this concept, you'll be able to then observe it and be able to choose differently. And that's where you gain control instead of being controlled by this thing. Okay, so I have already touched on this in other videos. I've touched this on, I actually have a Polyvagal video on my channel. I also have shorts that go in depth of each of the autonomic states. But anyway, I'm just going to touch briefly on this here now, because the reason why, of course, this is in episode 0. This is the very foundation of my channel and what it's all about. Okay, so, and this is what it comes down to with coaching, coaching my clients and everything. It is so important to understand this. Okay, so with the autonomic ladder. Okay, so autonomic, it's another word for just saying automatic. Okay, so our nervous system, it literally controls our behavior. It controls the way that we see the world and the way that we see other people. Okay, and that's essentially, so the nervous system has 3 different states. All right, let's put it simply. So you have I would say, I like to phrase it this way, the middle state, okay, which is your baseline. All right, your baseline is where you need to be and where you should be, and it's ventral. So ventral is where you are so excited, so happy to wake up in the morning. It feels like Christmas morning. And you wake up and you're so excited to open up your presents. And you, when you go out there into the living room and you're looking at your dad or your mom, and you're just seeing just so like much love for them. And when, as an adult, you look at people and you see so much potential in yourself as well. And well, of course, when you see potential in other people, the reason why you can see potential in other people, because you can see it in yourself. That's how this works. Is if you are, you've heard of a term called projection, I'm sure. The reason why people project onto other people is because they're saying things about that other person that they believe about themselves on the inside. Everything comes from within and then outward, expressed in our external environment, and that's how we perceive the world around us. Okay, so with the autonomic ladder in ventral baseline, right, you are curious, you are open, you are ready to take on tasks, and you are ambitious to start your life and to create things. Okay, now when you shift out of ventral, okay, it's known as, there's 2 states. So there's one above. This one's above because it's mobile energy. It's called sympathetic energy. It's like get up and go. I'm ready to take on the world, like actual movement. So ventral isn't technically like a mobile state. It's just like openness of your mind, because you're at peace. You feel peace within. And so you are in a state of confidence, and you're excited, and that gives you the energy to mobilize upward towards actual action and movement. And that's where sympathetic energy comes from. So your sympathetic on the autonomic ladder is where you actually take action, where you're able to to sit down at the computer, and if you want to write a book, you're up there every morning and you're typing in, and you're making chapters and getting all that done, and you're just talking to people, you're networking, you're just moving, you're doing things. Okay, now the other one is well, actually another thing, sympathetic, that up energy, it's also known as fight, flight, and freeze. So fight and flight. Well, actually, sorry, more fight flight, because those are the two mobile. Like fight, you're actually moving, and then flight, you're also moving, but in the other direction. So that's part of the F's, right? Like that's when you're triggered, you go in, and everybody, you've heard that, I'm sure, the fight and flight. Now, there's another state, and that's called dorsal. So dorsal is shut down. This is the bottom state. Dorsal is where you're collapsed. You're on your couch. You're probably playing video games, just like looking through the screen, and you're just numbing out, and you're just thinking to yourself, like, I'm going nowhere in life. I don't give a fuck. I don't care anymore. I don't care if I die. Like, it's just whatever, I rather just be here and exist, and just eat potato chips and watch Netflix on repeat. You're dreading the future. You think that there's no hope. You're totally disconnected. Now, I don't want to get too complex here, but essentially, I just want to make sure that you guys understand that I'm not saying that just because there's these three states, and that because you're in ventral, it's like technically good, and then sympathetic is like, it's all right, and then dorsal is like negative and bad. No, there's no such thing as technically a negative state, as in something that doesn't help you grow. They all help you grow. But also on top of that, when you come to a ventral state, like a pure ventral state, that could actually be bad for you as well, because you can become so passionate or compassionate, right? Or passionate for, other people. They can take advantage of you. And then essentially you get drained and you're stressed out and all that. So that can be a bad thing, right? You can be overly optimistic to think that, you can take on the world and do things and set goals for yourself that are at this point in, not achievable, because you have to take steps in order to get there. See, so it's not as basic as, oh yeah, ventral, if you're always in ventral, then you're good to go, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, and sympathetic, you have your fight and flight, and that's not necessarily bad, right? Because we needed that to protect us, right? Like a saber-toothed tiger, if a saber-toothed tiger back in the day was trying to get at you and stuff like that, and it was in the, the jungle or where saber-toothed tigers are in the friggin' winter, in a winter wonderland or whatever, wherever saber-toothed tigers are going these days, they're in some sort of bush, and they're not visible, and it's nighttime. All right. And so you're just like walking around, and anyway, all of a sudden a fucking saber-tooth pops out and tries to kill you. Okay. So your mind's not going to react as fast as that. Your body needs to react way before that. And that's why we have that, God-given ability that he gave us to protect us from literal danger, right? But unfortunately now in this modern age, in this modern world, we're no longer being, attacked by saber-tooths. And instead we're just sitting in our homes, and we're worried about, our, food delivery orders not on time, and so we give shit to the, the guy that's at the door or whatever, just because he's like 10 minutes late, so. And then we also feel anxiety or whatever from the fact that, he drove up in a car that's not identifiable, that we usually see. So just random shit like that triggers us back into this feeling of, oh my God, the world is ending kind of thing. And that's not good. But like I said, that can also be a good thing based off of, you being protected, and you needing that energy. And dorsal is not necessarily negative either. Like dorsal, you basically, there's moments where you need to be lazy. It took me a while for me to really understand that, and understand the importance of sometimes being lazy. But you need to have those moments where, you're just, after a nice long day of work or whatever, you want to sit back and chill out when you're fully, just your mind's going, and you've been super productive throughout the day. Fuck yeah, sit back and play some video games. Like, that's cool. I got myself a PS5 over there. I love it. It's fun. Just cuddle up and with your significant other, go for a nap, like read a book, like or meditate. Like all of that is dorsal. The difference is that there's a difference between like dorsal collapse, where like I said earlier, that's what that is, where you're basically totally collapse. I fucking hate life. Oh, I'm not gonna go anywhere. You got the blinds closed, in your apartment. It's all dark. You're eating potato chips and staying up till 4 a.m. That's dorsal collapse. And then sympathetic, like dorsal mixture is essentially that same thing, where it's like you had the fight and flight energy, but it's like really chaotic. And so your mind is going a mile an hour and nothing makes sense. And you're trying to like make supper in the kitchen, but at the same time, you think you need to reorganize your pantry. And like, it's just like all chaotic energy, and it's not actually helpful. And it's just like making you itchy and irritated. And like, you're getting super warm, and you're like really getting upset with people, irritated. And it's just not a good look. Right. And then, but sympathetic ventral, that is where you're able to take that chaotic energy and be able to level it out and make sense of it. So then your mind is able to really open up and have that energy of like innovation and creativity, and all of these ideas are flowing through your mind. But now, because you're in that state of actually making sense of it all, it's flowing very well together, and it's all coming together in a way that you can write a book and it's almost effortless, or make a video, or draw do some sketches, or whatever it is for you creatively, speaking. That's where you can get that energy from. And so anyway, I know like that was in a sense a very, oh yeah, and well, of course, ventral when it's like mixed with that dorsal energy, or collapse in a sense, really, that's where ventral can be not healthy, and not, because you get taken advantage of by people, all that stuff. So I'm just trying to share with you, wanted to share with you the basics of the autonomic ladder, but I really needed to get into that part of like, it's a cocktail, like the autonomic ladder levels, like they're states that are cocktails. They're not just like you are only experiencing good or bad. So glad I put that out there. Now, the other piece of the autonomic ladder is what's known as neuroception. Okay. So basically, neuro meaning, your brain, and ception is perception. Okay. So and this has to do the exact same thing with the autonomic ladder. They both go hand in hand. So when you're in a state of, say, for example, like dorsal collapse, right? Your mind is going to perceive, your nervous system is going to perceive life, which means other people, you, and your ambitions and goals, or lack thereof, through that lens. It's essentially, you can break it down into words to say that your state controls your story. And so if you're in that dorsal collapse, that's why you have those thoughts that come up and say, oh, I'm never going to go anywhere in life. I'm going to fail, and blah, blah, blah. It's never going to, get better, kind of thing. That is what's known as a dysregulated state. So dysregulation, where you are not looking through a truth lens. You're not seeing life the way it was designed. You're not seeing the way you were created by God. And if you believe in God and you understand that our source is pure love, it's pure openness, pure energy, pure joy and excitement and expansion. And so everything that comes from truth is expansion. And so if you're in a state where you are thinking in black and white terms, where it's not logical, so for you to have that thought in your mind that, oh, I'm not going to go anywhere in life, I'm a failure, everything's going to break down, or my girlfriend or wife is going to leave me, or whatever. Like, if you don't have any actual like signposts and no evidence or no actual experiences that really show that that's the case, but especially the fact of like, thinking that, oh, your life's never going to be, you're never going to have, any achievements and you're never going to go anywhere in life kind of thing. There's no logic to that. There's no actual like evidence that proves that that could be the case. And so that's how you know. And of course, also that it's negative. That's the biggest one. Is the moment that something like that shows up and it's like that literally has no growth to it. It's just stagnation or just total, collapse and destruction. That shows that it's not true. And if it's not true, then that means it doesn't matter. So what I'm trying to say here is that you will have all of these, and this is what this comes down to. You don't need to know anything about autonomic ladder. Well, you do, but I mean, like, if you strip all that away, you strip all away neuroception, you strip all away all that stuff. What it comes down to, like I said at the very beginning, is that we have voices in our head, and the voices are those different states manifested because that they have memories from our past that create those traumas. Therefore, what I call shadow is basically our traumas that have attached to our nervous system attaches these traumas and then sees life through that lens, and then basically sees the world and other people through that lens as well. And that's why, well, with your wife, you can think that your mother, like your wife, has characteristics of your mother and start judging her through that lens, and all of these different ideas that basically make you make the wrong choice, and you perceive people in a certain way, which ends up you judging somebody and misunderstanding them. And then that leads to a lot of resentments and conflict, and you see where this goes. So that's why when we can understand that these are just voices that we're having in our minds that are based off of our past hurts, well, for one, we can understand, okay, in order to help myself, not, yeah, it does in a sense silence the voices, because the more you understand that this isn't actually you, it's just this perception that you've created through trauma. That way you can separate the two and you can understand. And this is the mantra, in a sense, that I live by. It's only for a season. And I'm not saying season as in like, oh, in the next 6 or 12 months or whatever, it's going to change or whatever. No, I just mean for a certain amount of time, you are going to think that way. You're going to feel that way. You're going to feel like, you wake up in the morning and for some reason you feel super anxious. You can't get out of bed and you think to yourself that you're not going to go anywhere in life. And if you understand that you are just dysregulated right now, that you are in a place of not truth, but you are at home in truth level, like that's where you are, that's how you were created. But right now you're dysregulated, so you're off center. So just know that you will come back to that center, and when you come back to that center, you will feel relieved. You will feel just that pressure come off of you. You'll be able to sleep better, and it will affect the rest of your life. And the more you practice that, the more that you become aware of these alternative states, that's when you can separate and understand that I am at my base level from truth and from expansion and from the power that Christ has given me to do all things. So when you can see it through that lens, that's where everything starts to make sense, where you can even have conversations with your significant other and say, when you feel like, you think to yourself that she thinks you're stupid, all of a sudden you have this idea in your mind that comes through and it's like, she thinks I'm stupid and she's just hiding it, but she knows deep down that I am. And so I resent her for not being honest with me. If you have that random thought pop in your mind, instead of not saying anything about it And instead of thinking that it's you and like that's how you actually feel about your wife, and maybe she actually is doing something, and so you have to then like justify it by trying to find bullshit evidence that shows that that's the case, but it's fucking not. Instead of going down that rabbit hole and just really fucking up your marriage, you can just be honest and share out loud and say, "Hey, look, honey, like I'm right now feeling like you're judging me right now, and I'm feeling like you think that I'm stupid and that I'm like not capable of of achieving or whatever." And now, unfortunately, this only works if your partner understands polyvagal and understands what I've been sharing with you. If she doesn't, then that can be perceived, unfortunately, as other things, which then doesn't make the thing better. And that's a whole different story. But for now, anyway, it's always good to you do want to, of course, share the truth. But now I'll just say this, and I'll close it out. I didn't want this to be that long for episode 0, but you want to share the truth always. Now, there's a caveat to that. You have to truly start to work the muscles of understanding your nervous system and how you go through different states, the ventral, sympathetic, and dorsal. But on top of that, the people closest to you, you have to also understand where they are at any given time. And that comes with training. That comes with time. And you're only able to do that based off of your partner's ability to handle when things get rough, when there are conflicts, when there's conflict, when there's arguments, when people are blaming someone for something else that they didn't do, or perceiving them in a certain way and thinking that they're this kind of person when they're not. And it's all because of neuroception. It's because we're always throughout the day, all these different things trigger us to then move into these different states. So like, say for example, for me, like I'm right now working a general labor job. And so that kind of work, I'm not really a fan of physical labor. And so when I have to do that long term, I get worn down, and then I start catastrophizing about my performance. And so that then affects my day, basically. I then start thinking that other people are making fun of me, and they see how terrible I am at work and everything, and it's really stupid, and I hate it. But that's how this works. This is how the nervous system functions. But anyway, when your partner So when your partner is going through a different state, like say, for example, if your partner's in dorsal collapse, right? And they're just lying down a lot of the times, like they're on their phone scrolling. They're just really, closed off from you, closed off from what it seems like the rest of the world kind of thing. Like you don't want to share that kind of honesty in that moment, in that scenario that I said earlier about like, I feel, honey, like right now that like, you don't think that I'm like smart enough, that I'm good enough kind of thing. She's going to take that as something completely different, fortunately, because like I said, when you are in that different state, you're perceiving life through that lens. And so you see other people's input as something that even when you're in ventral and you're in a ventral pure state, which is healthy, you will then come off to other people, unfortunately, as like manipulative, as whatever kind of way that they would perceive, lying, or just like being strange and weird and crazy, which is unfortunate. And that's why this gets very complicated. That's why each person, of course, individually has their own what's known as a baseline, right? So within the autonomic ladder, those states, we have different baselines. So just for an example of this, I'll just put this to an hour. Like I thought I was going to do 45, but I'm sorry. Like I needed to get into this stuff. But anyway, so with my baseline, my baseline is sympathetic ventral. And so sympathetic ventral is like I'm always like wanting to work and like produce and just like, a network and just build things and create things, and just like even, also dancing, like dancing my ass off, or singing karaoke and just giving it my all kind of thing, right? That's my baseline. And so I like music that has that kind of that energy. So like screamo music, I like, Day to Remember, Pierce the Veil, I Prevail, Billy Talent, Falling in Reverse, Beartooth, these bands that are screamo, heavy, like angry, and just like, guitar riffs and fucking bass and drums and all that stuff, like to get your fucking head banging, even though I don't have hair and shit. But see, and that's my baseline, right? But then there's other people that have different baselines. So there's someone, say for example, that has sort of a dorsal, a ventral, right? So they're more like wanting to cuddle up with a good book on the couch, or just read poetry, go for a walk, like or watch a movie and stuff like that. That stuff is like a dorsal type experience, and that's not bad, right? And what we're all trying to do, this is what it's all about. This is literally like where we're all supposed to be going here. When someone says that they need to be their true self, they need to be the fullest version of who they are, what they're actually saying without realizing it. Now, of course, everybody has their own perceptions and beliefs about different things, but what this actually really comes down to, based off of what neuroscience actually says and what your nervous system actually says, because all of this stuff is literally, there's so much scientific evidence and experimentation that basically shows like how all of this works. If you want to know more about that, by the way, check out a book called Polyvagal World by Seth and Stephen Porges. Stephen Porges is a neuroscientist. He's been doing this for a long ass time, and his son Seth Porges, like Stephen can be very like heavy with the jargon terms of neuroscience, because he's like a real like that kind of intelligent, like analytical intelligent guy. But Seth really brings it down to a simple level for everybody to understand and to relate to what polyvagal is and how it works. But anyway, with that that concept of perception and the different baselines, right? So in that other baseline, dorsal collapse. So what we need to do, what we're trying to do, is, because, say for example, like I'll just use me for example, right? Sympathetic ventral, like that's my pure state. So, but I need to start to embrace other states and get used to other states and feeling and experiencing life in those other states. So before, I used to think laziness was like trash, like people were weak that were lazy. And now I'm not saying that they're weak or anything, but that can be an unhealthy thing for sure. But there's also a healthy version of being lazy, which is, just being very intimate and cuddled up with your significant other on the couch or whatever, doing your thing. So that's something that I needed to get used to by interacting with someone on an intimate level, like your significant other, that has a different state, a different pure state, right? A different baseline state. And so that's what we're trying to do. That's the essence of us being fully our true selves, is being able to go in and out of these states, these different states, and experience them without feeling these anxiety and just like just a weird jittery, like not feeling safe, kind of not feeling open, feeling closed off and disconnected, or feeling very judgmental and feeling like you're crazy for feeling this way. Feeling these different states and going in and out of these states, where one moment you might be singing a song, and the next moment you might be reading a book, and in the next moment you might be boxing someone in the UFC kind of thing. Some people that don't understand polyvagal theory, they look at somebody like that and they think that that's manic. They think that that's somebody that is unhinged and unable to control themselves. Now, that can be the case. Of course, there are people that just don't have any understanding of emotional intelligence, and they just suppress that so long, and their ability to understand their self and their inner worlds, that they are kind of unhinged in a sense. But then there are those, and it is actually very few, like not many people are aware of this, especially in this day and age, that there was a time where actually people, actually back in the early days, where we had, just horse and buggy times, where you had people that were just so used to reading books or going for walks or playing tennis and going out and experiencing life, and feeling the somatic experience of life, that their nervous systems would automatically have these experiences that would just train them without understanding anything to do with the actual nervous system or polyvagal or emotional intelligence or anything like that. But unfortunately, the world that we live in now, it's kind of collapsed on itself, because technology is really big now, and it is so encompassing that a lot of the times people are just sitting down or lying down, and they're on their phones or they're playing a video game, and so they're getting this sort of, in a sense, artificial feeling of, these states, but they're not really expressed in their truest form. And so what ends up happening is that you don't actually express and feel these nervous system states naturally for your nervous system to then, be able to acclimate to them and acclimate to these different experiences. You unfortunately get this sort of artificial version of it. And that way, when you pick up a book, right, and then you try to shift into like playing tennis, no, you can't do that. You feel anxious, you feel like, you're sweating all over, and the world's closing in on you, and like, no, I can't do this, I can't leave my home. And that's why a lot of people are unfortunately wanting to spend more time home instead of going outside and doing things that make us truly experience what life really has to offer. So anyway, guys, that's it for this episode 0 of Unmasked Live. Thanks for watching and tuning in. I want to get a lot from this. I just wanted to show that, I'm not just the guy, behind the camera with the 3 different voices and doing all that cool stuff, or a coach doing one-on-ones, but I'm also wanting to, just shoot the shit and share openly about who I am, right? No script, just I was gonna say raw dog, but that brings up not cool thoughts. So anyway, yeah, I'll just stop talking now. So anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. I know technically, by the way, that this isn't live. That's one thing I'll say right before I end this. It's funny that my first episode, I call it episode 0 for that reason, actually, is that this isn't actually live, because I'm still waiting on some back end things for me to actually go live, and for you guys to come in and comment and whatever you want to do, and we can interact and go back and forth kind of thing. But until then, so the next episode will probably be actually live. So this is technically not Unmasked Live, but it is. But it's episode 0, so it's fine. So anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. I love you guys very much, truly. And you guys are all going to be well off. There's nothing to worry about. And when there is something to worry about, it's only for a moment, and then it's all good, and then you're good to go until next time. So yeah, life is fucking fascinating.